I've often listened with great interest to the personal stories of people who have given up believing in God, and I've been struck by how often the God that they gave up believing in was the kind of God that I wouldn't want either. Which raises the question, who and what is God? Hi, I'm Kirk, and I'm a scientist and a philosopher and a person who spends a lot of time thinking about the why questions in life. So if you're interested in discussions pertaining to God, science, and life, then please subscribe to my channel here where I'll be posting on a regular basis. You can also subscribe to my social media accounts, and the links are below. One September, at the beginning of a new school year as an undergraduate university student, I had just settled into my seat when a young woman I'd never seen before walked into the room and sat down across the small classroom from me. There was something different about her that got my attention, but I could not figure out what it was. Although I was not interested in becoming involved in a relationship at that point, preferring to focus on my studies instead, in the weeks that followed, I felt compelled to scan the rooms and the hallways if I thought she might be in the area. Within a couple of weeks, I had an opportunity to have our first conversation. She was always relaxed and perfectly at ease as we occasionally met and talked. The more I got to know her, the more I felt I had finally come home, so to speak. The restlessness I had felt for years was gone when I was with her. We've now been married for 40 years. Prior to the first time I ever saw her face, I had no idea of who or what kind of woman I would end up marrying someday. In fact, I couldn't even imagine how we would not get utterly bored with each other within a week or two of getting married. But the real woman that I married was so different from anyone I had been able to imagine. Now, reflecting on this, I find that there's some remarkable parallels between finding out who and what God is and me finding out what kind of a woman I would actually marry someday. Just as I was happily living life on my own and even resistant to the idea of actually getting involved in a relationship, so I observed that many people are just happily living their life, perfectly fine without God. And in fact, many are even resistant to the idea of God or pursuing God or finding out more about Him. Second, just as I began to experience an almost irresistible compulsion to get to know that woman once I actually met her, once our paths crossed, so I find that many people have a similar experience with God when God begins to get involved in their lives. They cannot seem to get God out of their thoughts. Third, just as I have experienced something far more fulfilling than I had ever imagined in my relationship with the woman who became my wife, so it is that when we actually connect with the real God and understand who and what He is, we may experience something far more wonderful than we had ever imagined. There is an ancient description of God that goes something like this. Every good thing given and every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no shifting shadow. Now just take a second look at that first line. We're talking about a being here who is the origin of beauty. He's not just beautiful, He is the origin of beauty, of purity, of love, and of music, and honor, and art, the origin of power and life itself. The list goes on, opening outwards like rooms opening into more rooms. Let's just take beauty for example. Take all the beauty that you've ever seen in your entire life. Then add to that all the beauty that everyone else has ever seen in their lives. Then add to that all the beauty contained on distant planets, star clusters, deep space nebula, and all the galaxies in the universe. All the beauty in the universe that no one has ever yet seen or even imagined. All of that would only be a finite portion of what has come from the being who is beauty and the origin of beauty, the being who is infinite beauty a magnitude of beauty that is so vastly beyond anything we could ever imagine that no mortal could even handle the sheer mind-staggering power of it. And this is only one attribute of the Father of lights. Now think about how you would feel when you see something very beautiful. Like a sunset, for example. There's a compulsion to acknowledge and respond to that beauty. It could be the gorgeous sunset or a powerful musical score that moves an audience to tears. Now, if you consider that the more powerful or beautiful something is, the more powerful the compulsion is to respond to it, then to see infinite beauty would be like subjecting a very thin wire to an infinite voltage. It would be annihilated instantly. So when you begin to consider or conceive of a beauty that is so powerful that the universe itself is unable to contain it, then you have taken the first tiny step towards understanding who and what God is. Just as we've done for beauty, we could then go through the same exercise for justice, and then for joy, music, purity, and all the rest of those good things and perfect gifts. Each attribute by itself, in its pure and infinite form, would instantly overwhelm and annihilate our finite mortal capability to handle and respond to it. Then roll all those attributes together into something inconceivably mind-blowing. Perhaps this gives us insight into another ancient statement about God, where God says this: "No human being can see my face and live." Such a being as the Father of lights, the one from whom every good thing is given, sounds wonderful at first glance, until we think a little bit deeper about what happens when the one who is the origin of flawless, inconceivable perfection and justice and right and good comes into contact with humanity, which in many ways has not done all that well on this world. In fact, an enormous amount of evil and suffering have been produced by us. We actually might be in deep trouble, and this may explain to some degree why some people feel a deep guilt or fear when they think about God. But God does not want that for us. It reminds me of something that C.S. Lewis wrote. C.S. Lewis was an Oxford professor of English literature, and he wrote, and I quote, "I wonder whether people who ask God to interfere openly and directly in our world quite realize what it will be like when he does. When that happens, it is the end of the world. When you see the whole natural universe just melting away like a dream, and something else, something it never entered your head to conceive, come crashing in. Something so beautiful to some of us, and so terrible to others that none of us will have any choice left. For this time, it will be God without disguise, something so overwhelming that it will strike either irresistible love or irresistible horror into every creature." There is an ancient account about 3,400 years old where God appeared to Moses in a bush that was aflame but unconsumed with fire. In that account, God said his name is I Am. He said, "This is my name forever. This is my memorial name to all generations." There are massive implications for God, time, and nature. The name I Am describes a being who transcends time. For God, the present, past, and future are all the same. God is the origin of time and the foundation of the physical world. He knows the decisions of billions of people simultaneously, as well as the consequences of all those decisions to the end of time, because he's already there as well. The norm for our culture in the 21st century is for each person to have their own, say, idea of who or what that something out there might be. It is vague and often undefined and customized to each individual's feelings on what kind of God they would really be comfortable with. But a belief is true if and only if it corresponds to reality. So, what is reality when it comes to God? I could not have realistically imagined who and what kind of woman I could possibly spend my life with if I had not encountered her in real life. Similarly, God may seem so vague and undefined, so not seen, as it were, in our everyday life that we may very much doubt that God even exists. Given the big difference, and that's a massive understatement, between us and God, if we can ever hope to know who and what God is, He would have to take the initiative to interact with us in a way that we can actually meet God in real life. There's an historical figure who said that He was I Am, and who is astonishingly unique in human history for two reasons. First, He fulfilled ancient prophecies concerning the Messiah or Christ that we know were written centuries or even more than 1,000 years before He came. Second, the historical record seems to strongly point to His physical resurrection from the dead. Now, in the academic world, the full range of scholars unanimously or nearly unanimously grant four things pertaining to Jesus of Nazareth. They would regard these as four facts. The first one is that He performed feats that the people of the day believed were miracles. Second, He believed and proclaimed that He was the prophesied Messiah or the Christ. Third, that He was crucified. And finally, fourth, shortly after His crucifixion, hundreds of people had experiences that led them to believe that they were actually seeing someone who had risen from the dead. Now, the full range of scholars are not actually saying that He had actually risen from the dead or He actually appearing to them, just that they do concede that the people of the day had experiences that led them to believe they were actually seeing the risen Christ. So even if one is an atheist, those four historical facts are something that give this unique person a level of credibility that no other person in history has. If we actually wish to know who and what God is, then a personal relationship with the Father of Lights in real life seems to be required. It appears that He has actually made the first move when He stepped into the world as Jesus of Nazareth, the one who actually said He is I Am. The second step is to decide whether Jesus is who and what He said He is. And if you agree that He is, then the third step is to accept that invitation that He has extended to every person. For example, He said, "Look at me. I stand at the door to your soul and I knock. If you hear my voice and open the door, I will come into you and dine with you and you with me." Now, the implications of God dining with you and you with Him are those of a deeply fulfilling relationship, far beyond anything we could experience with one of our fellow human beings. He also said, "I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. I will give to the one who thirsts from the spring of life without cost." I've experienced countless amazing, beautiful things over the course of my life. I've seen beauty that is actually beyond my ability to describe. And I have experienced the enormous fulfillment of knowing and loving that woman who walked into class more than 40 years ago. But the most fulfilling thing, by far, that I have ever experienced is loving and being loved by the Father of Lights, knowing the one who is the origin of beauty and love and music and art and every good thing given and every perfect gift. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video, or at least found it thought-provoking. And if you did, please share it, or you can leave a comment in the section below. And also, don't forget to hit the like button.